My topic is involving, for the most part, integrating technology into the classroom. So I've kind of titled it, Are Schools Preparing Our Children for the Digital Future? And with the issue, it's basically looking at just the fact that our students are not prepared for the digital future. And kind of some things off from that is that, and really the main reason is because our schools do not have the necessary technologies to teach digital literacies. And that is primarily due to the lack of funding, the lack of proactiveness, and the lack of support. The main focus throughout my paper is looking really at the importance of integrating technology in the classroom. It's also going to focus on the benefits. So where I have to start is looking at kind of these things called digital literacies, and also how those things are going to prepare our students for the future, and also looking at the benefits of using that technology. And these are benefits for both teachers and students. And there's several different benefits, but I kind of only focus on a few. And then kind of looking at some reasons why we don't actually have schools doing this. So we know that it's important, but why are we not doing it? So just kind of a little information on why I actually chose this topic. I mean, part of it had to do with just the fact that, I am a teacher. I am looking at, educational technology because I know that technology is important, and I know it's something that's here, but it's going to be even more intense in the future in terms of integrating it into our classroom. So I was kind of curious for myself how to do that. But this specific topic, there was actually more to it than that. And it came from a personal experience. It was a discussion that I was having with another science teacher. And, I was talking to her about how, because I have Chromebooks in my classroom this year, and I was sharing with her some of my frustrations that I was having within my classroom using the technology, and a little bit of how it was taking, extra time than what I wanted it to. And basically, she told me that I needed to give up on the technology, right? So this technology was just taking too much time. It was making it so I was behind from where they were. And then she asked me, what's more important, teaching the science or teaching the technology? And, immediately I said, the technology. And then she kind of just turns to me and she's like, no, the science. We need to think about the test. And the main reason where that comes from is with our test scores, the standardized test scores, we were the only subject that dropped in our test scores. And we dropped quite a bit. And it wasn't because our students weren't learning. Kind of the problem was the fact that, we're teaching our students these new Michigan science standards, and they're being tested on the old standards. So there's just kind of this disconnect between the tests and the standards that we're teaching them. So it really had nothing to do with kind of what we were doing. But in my opinion, and especially going through like this educational technology master's, is I've looked at this idea that it's actually more important that we're setting our students up for success in the future. And one thing of that is the technology. So that's kind of where all this idea actually came from. A lot of it anyway. So kind of with the introduction, I just kind of look at this idea about how this lack in funding for schools, this lack of proactiveness and this willingness to change, and a lack of support for integrating technology is really making it so our schools do not have the necessary technologies, the necessary tools to be able to teach these digital literacies to students. And because of that, our students are not prepared for the future, especially in terms of how to use the technology. So I have to start out by expressing this importance of digital literacies. So at first, I'm going to kind of talk about what they are, because a lot of people don't really know what they are. And, I just bring up this idea about how they're very similar to writing and reading literacies. We have these common core standards that we have to go through and teach in every single subject, and eventually in the future, this is going to be looking at digital literacies, right? We're going to have, throughout all of our content areas, we're going to be having to integrate technology. And we're going to have these digital literacies that are going to be stressed just like the reading and writing ones. But the nice thing is that they're all going to end up supporting each other. But either way, so I also bring up how, it's more than just understanding the technology and understanding the skills or how to use those programs. It's actually more about kind of the problem solving skills. So I have, here's just that research, but these were things that have kind of always been important. But the change is just with the idea of how to use technology to support that and how to problem solve with technology. So, I mean, even things like knowing what images to use, knowing copyright things, citing, and just even the idea of, how to do this efficiently with using technology. And then I bring up this idea of, why are digital literacies important? And this all has to do with preparing students for the future. It's kind of a big aspect in my paper. And really, the problem becomes, how can schools support students with this technology if we don't have it? That's also kind of where the paper goes. But before I kind of talk about that, I also think it's important to bring up some benefits. I'm not going to go through and list too many. There are a lot of benefits of technology. I think the biggest thing is realizing that it can be a support system within the content. A lot of people, when you are kind of given something new, this new idea in teaching, you think that you have to keep it separate, but you don't. And technology is that same way. You don't teach this technology separate from your content, you integrate it all together. So just some even little benefits, for teachers is just this idea that we can actually collect data digitally. That digital data allows us to see student learning immediately. And this is something within my classroom I do. I use this thing called spiral.ac, and I can see immediately what every single one of my students are thinking in terms of what they type. And that's very powerful for me because normally I understand or I see students who are willing to share answers. This allows students to share answers without actually having to talk out loud, which for some cases is very beneficial. And it's also just being able to provide immediate feedback to students. I know for me in terms of grading, it can take a long time, but if there's something where I can allow them to see their answers right away, that's going to enhance their learning even more. In terms for students, we have just enhancing those problem solving skills, which really everything we do, we try to enhance those skills. And then also just being able to take ownership of their learning more easily, right? So we can allow students to almost choose how they want to use things, and technology can allow us to actually do that way easier than not having technology. The biggest thing, again, is just having that technology. I know at least with the district I'm from, we have a lot of students who don't have access to internet at home. We have a lot of students who don't have technology at home, especially computers. So that really means that as a school, it is up to us to allow students to have these opportunities of using technology and open those doors for them. And the biggest thing is, how can we do that when we don't have the money to buy technology? And, how can we do that when, we have teachers, we have administrators, we have schools that aren't really willing to change, and maybe it's more just because they're not really sure how to. But also, you also have this lack of the support, right? We need to make sure that the school is being supported, or we're being supported by the school, the community, and as well as the government. So in terms of the lack of the funding, I'm just kind of go through and address a few solutions. Not saying that these are the best solutions out there, but they're things that I've known other schools to use. The Technology Foundation, actually St. Louis Public Schools, has something like this, which I always thought was a wonderful idea. And I've tried bringing this up to my school, but they're not open to it because it relies heavily on the community. A sinking fund is something that our school district is trying to do. And, this is looking at taxes, increasing taxes so we can actually buy technology. But again, that's looking at community support because this has to pass for it to actually happen. Or there's grants, which our school has been looking at doing grants, but it's not enough. You can't get enough grants to cover everything in technology. In terms of proactiveness, again, it's just, getting schools and teachers on board to actually change. The biggest thing is just how